Hello, everybody. The Final Fantasy set will be releasing next week. The set has 310 cards and will be legal in every format. In this video, I'll highlight the most important cards that caught my eye relevant to Brawl and Standard Brawl. Let's begin. Starting with White, the most important, I would say, card for White in this set would be Cloud, Midgar Mercenary. The value of Cloud is more important for Standard Brawl than Brawl because Brawl already has a card which is Mystic Forge. Let's show it. So in Brawl, they already have Mystic Forge. It's a core artificer, it's a 2 mana 1/2 and has the ability to search for an equipment and has the activated ability to even put equipment card from your hand to the battlefield. The value from Cloud releasing for both formats is Standard Brawl does not have any equipment tutor, so it increases in value by having a way to tutor equipment. It makes equipment decks significantly more relevant, especially with their white. There is Kellen, I believe, in Boros, but you are stuck in those two colors, so having white gives you significantly more flexibility for equipment decks. The other value is Cloud is still another equipment tutor. Brawl has Mystic Forge, but what happens if you already tutor for it and you want more equipment? Normal equipment decks want to search many times, or at least a couple times, of their most powerful equipment spells. If Mystic Forge gets countered or gets milled, now you don't have a way to tutor for your equipment. Cloud gives you that insurance policy. There is a disadvantage as there's a tutor spell, especially going Selesnya, which is Invasion of Ikoria. So let's look. So here we go for the green. Invasion of Ikoria has you you can search your library and your graveyard for non-human creature. Cloud is a human, so you couldn't be able to tutor for it. So that's one of the disadvantages. And this card is legal in Standard Brawl. So that is probably the only disadvantage if you want to go in Naya or Celestia for a Cloud deck. Especially for the multicolor Cloud, if you want to play in Brawl, you wouldn't be able to search for this Cloud, but you're able to search for Mystic Sanction, Mystic Forge, which is a core artificer. It's not a human, so it's a lot more versatile. Still, even in those decks, you want to still run multiple equipment tutors as they are by far your most important card for equipment deck. And as a commander, Cloud has the advantage to double its triggers from the equipment ability if himself is equipped. The problem is you are stuck in one color and you need to protect Cloud, give it some sort of evasion or clear the way for him, making it quite difficult. But even if he's not as invaluable as a commander, in the 99, I would say it's a must craft for equipment decks. The second commander I recommend, I really will believe it's going to be quite good, is Aerith Gainsborough. It's a 3 mana 2/2 human cleric, legendary creature with lifelink, and has the Ajani Primate effect, which is whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on Aerith Gainsborough. And when this creature dies, you may put those X 1/1 counters to each legendary creature. It's important for it's each is not a single one, but it has the restriction that it can only hit legendary creatures. If we look in Arena, there are, especially for Brawl format, there are many ways to gain life. Even in mono white, which is a restriction, and you have some payoffs. One of the disadvantages for going these Ajani Primate effects is there was none in the command zone, especially in mono white. The closest thing would be Ajani Strength of the Pride. It costs 4, and in response could get countered, get destroyed, but it was the closest effect. And at 4, it has its limitations. Also, Planeswalkers are very difficult to return for cheap, and you normally have to pay the extra command tax, which really limits this type of deck. So having just at a 3-drop is very important. As other creatures similar effect, of course, Johnny's Pridemate, you have Essence Chandler, and Hallowed Priest are your big hitters with a very similar effect. As for legendaries as your payoff, there are several legendary creatures that are just cheap. I do believe in a deck like this, quantity is more important than quality, because your most important aspect is to make your commander as strong as possible, and then if it dies, you're able to distribute to as many legendary creatures as you can. White also has many ways to have more white protection from destruction spells, and cards like Steel Seraph can give that those giant creatures some sort of evasion. For the next important card to consider is Phoenix Down. Phoenix Down is a 1 mana artifact with 2 untap and exile this artifact and choose 1. Return target creature card from mana 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and exile target's skeleton, spirit, or zombie. Normally 60 card formats, the second text is not as relevant, but in Brawl, you face an entire field of opponents, and it's not uncommon you face one of those types, Skeleton, Spirit, and Zombie, and becomes a very flexible card into those commanders, especially if those cards have indestructible, you can just deal with them immediately. But the most important effect is exiling the artifact and getting a creature with mana 4 or less. One of the biggest limitations, especially in white, is once you go for from 3 to 4 mana, reanimating your commander or a legendary creature becomes significantly more difficult. If you go on 4 and for example you're not in black, it's very difficult to reanimate them. There is Zombify, which is one of the cheaper spells that can reanimate anything, but you're stuck in black. There's also Reanimate, but it's also in black as well. And it's the most mana efficient, and the other is Zombify. Ooh, it cost a 4. Zombify is your other cheap option, but it costs 4 mana. So by only costing 3, or you could split, paying 1 mana on turn 1, and then later when you need it, you can always bring back a creature. So I do like the flexibility, and you're not forced to use it immediately, unlike other reanimation spells. So you can just, there are turns where you have 1 or 2 mana left, you just play Phoenix Down, and in future turns, for example, the opponent board wiped, and you in response at the end of turn, sacrifice Phoenix Down, bring back that creature, and next turn it can come in attacking, making it quite flexible. There is a disadvantage though, and the disadvantage is it can get destroyed in response. So that's the biggest downside, is you pay 2, you exile the artifact, the opponent in the response destroys it, you don't have mana, and it becomes an issue. You can play around that because you're not limited to doing it at sorcery speed. So you may play this with 4 mana open, and for example, you activate it in response to trying to kill it. You may activate it again because you haven't cast the tapped yet. It's before you tapped, so you're able to, as long as you have the mana, play around it as much as you can. But this effect is quite unique, and white doesn't have this effect for quite cheap. Next card to consider Restoration Magic, which has tiered. Tiered's a new keyword where you can pay the extra mana. You always have to pay a cost. And you pay, for example, from 0 to up to 5 because it's 4 and 1. And you get the additional effects. The most important effect is with 0, target permanent gains hexproof and is destructible on the end of turn. And later for 1, if you pay 1, you get 3 life. And if you pay 4, it's not only 1 permanent, but your entire permanents, all of your permanents, and you get 6 life. Why is Restoration Magic better or pretty valuable for this set? There are many cards that do similar effects, but what makes Restoration Magic unique is its flexibility, and 2, it's not limited to just creatures. The only other effect, there is one in for 1 mana, that can protect artifacts. And it's this one, Lauren Escape. So target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible. So this is quite useful because it's not limited to creatures. So being limited to creatures is the biggest disadvantage of your other protection spells. You can only target a creature, but this card can now target your permanents, planeswalkers, artifacts, equipment, enchantments, even lands. It's quite flexible, and I do believe this may be in why the premier hexproof and indestructible card, due to its flexibility and the value of equipment decks, really want to not only protect their commander or the creature, but also the equipment. Next card is Minwu White Mage. It's a 5-mana 3/3 human cleric with Vigilance of Lifelink, and whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on each cleric you control. Not very valuable in 60 card formats, so could be easily disregarded, but in Brawl, this effect should not be ignored because mainly it is on each cleric. So if you go for in Brawl and check out the cleric list, so we just go here and search cleric. There are a lot of clerics, and there's some powerful ones like Given a Runes that you play normally. So it's not difficult to go wide deck, set up with your clerics, even on one. These are just on one. And then the turn you play your commander, you also have effects that have when they do immediately gain life. Example would be, where are you? A Johnny's Welcome effect, where when a creature you control enters, gain 1 life. And that strategy would revolve around you set up your board of clerics, you set up, and even some of those clerics even get life as well. Some creatures, for example, Soul Warden, when another creature enters, gain 1 life. You play your commander that turn, you immediately get the triggers, you pump your entire board, and you go on offense. So that's the advantage of this card, because even though it's expensive, the only way around it is your opponent has to A, counter your commander, or B, they have to clear the board so that Minwu doesn't become as dangerous. Still, it's a very difficult proposition for your opponent and makes this commander not as mediocre as you may think. Due to its immediate synergy and immediate effect, you don't need to even cast any spells on the stack for this trigger to resolve. It's whenever you just gain life, and all these triggers are independent to each other, they're not simultaneous, just one big life. So for each trigger, you're pumping your entire board. Make a massive board, not unlikely to get 3-4 counters with just a single cast, and then you just go in for lethal. So main one is quite nice. In standard brawl, it's a lot more difficult because there are significantly less clerics, and it becomes a lot more unreliable to cast Mimo, but for Brawl, absolutely can work as a commander. Alright, now let's continue with our next color. For blue, let's start with Astrologian's Planisphere. It's a 2-mana artifact equipment with job selects. Job selects a new keyword, and it has, when this equipment enters, it becomes attached to a 1/1 colorless hero. It's quite useful because it immediately becomes equipped to a creature, and has a cook creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is quite useful, and it's very important in blue decks, specifically mono blue decks really want this type of card, because one of their biggest issues is they may draw quite a few cards, but their creatures aren't strong enough. So this is a big way to complement that style in Brawl, and very importantly in Standard Brawl, for those that like the Aether Drift. Oh, it doesn't have. I have to go for two. There's for the verbose host, for example, that loves drawing cards. It really wants this type of equipment, and there are several commanders that are especially mono blue that have many ways to draw cards to scry, but they don't have ways to increase the power and toughness of their creatures. Australian's Planessphere can help you get there, and the effects are independent. They cast quite a few non-creature spells, and it's not unlikely for them to draw two cards in a single turn, so they can make that one creature significantly stronger. Next card is Louise Luisok's Sacrifice. It's a 1 mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a legendary creature or pay 2. Counter target activated ability, triggered ability, or non-creature spell. This Brawl is important, especially for those that have commanders that are in blue, because they're already legendary creatures. And blue does have a couple powerhouse creatures that are legendary. But then you may ask, why should I sacrifice them to just be a counter to a non-creature spell? Well, most of those blue cards, especially their finishers, their most valuable effect is on your turn when you cast them. They may have a triggered ability or during the combat, and after that, you would have a gigantic board. So your only real threat next turn you haven't finished the game is if the opponent casts a board wipe. So it's a really good board wipe insurance for those type of decks by just paying 1. And you're not limited to having to pay extra costs. And it's only that the value of the 1 mana. So that means in the turn before, many of those commanders cost 4 or 5 mana. So you normally don't have much left even to play a counter spell. So being able to have just that emergency setup of, alright, I'm gonna go for lethal. I have this card in my hand. Next turn the opponent plays farewell. I play this card and you just counter. It's a negate for 1 mana. And you also have Swan Song to also complement that style if you need to just protect your board. Though Swan Song has the disadvantage that you have to give them a creature, and in blue decks, it's also a flyer, so many of the blue decks really don't like giving the opponent a flyer. But the most important ability is it's not the opponent has to pay extra mana, which in the late game they will be able to, is just an immediate counter. It's a nice insurance policy, and worst case scenario, you just pay 3. It's not the end of the world. It's quite useful. For legendary commanders that, for example, planeswalkers, then this effect becomes a lot less reliable, but is important to consider now, especially for that 1 mana, and the opponent played a Swan Song. Maybe they played already their Wash Away. Now they have another spell. You have to be careful of that one. Next card is Travel to the Overworld. It's a 7 mana sorcery spell with affinity towns. So if this spell costs 1 less to cast for each town you control, and draw 4 cards. Point here is there are gonna be town decks. There is a multipolar commander that really likes towns, and if that commander becomes quite good, then Travel the Overworld is pretty good. It's pretty nice as well. Golos can also play a town deck with Golos, with 5 mana Golos, and play many towns and play these for cheap. This is going to be quite useful, especially those 4 or 5 color decks, and have access to all the towns released from this set. As for commanders, Matoya Archon Elder is a 3 mana 1/4 human warlock, and whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card. One of the big limitations is blue is they have to decide They have some pretty good surveil or scry cards, but they don't draw themselves or they're more expensive to draw. So having this commander gives you the flexibility of constantly being able to scry and play surveil cards. Many of those cards are pretty cheap, and it makes cards that have inherently draw and surveil now become draw too. So it's very easy to get massive card advantage. And even in the 99, if you're running a Scry or Surveil deck, now this legendary creature will give you that extra effect. I would say the biggest limitation is you are in mono blue, and mono blue has its restrictions. But this is a very interesting card where those Scry and Surveil effects that normally are just fine, but maybe they were cheap, now they become quite valuable, and you're in a turn be able to draw many cards, come back into the game. Next is the water crystal. So this is a blue of the crystal lines. There's one for each color. And for the blue one, it's a 4-mana legendary artifact with blue spells cost 1 less to cast. And if an opponent mills 1 or more cards, they mill that many cards plus 4. And has 6 mana tap. Each opponent mills cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. So the value of water crystal, I would say, is a bit interesting. I would say more for standard brawl than brawl, because in standard brawl it's 60 cards, unlike 100. As it is possible to mill in 100 card decks, but you're most likely gonna run cards that mill half their library instead of going for a single mill. It's a lot more viable in standard brawl. And in that format, it becomes quite interesting because there are quite a few ways to mill, but you're only milling at a time. But now, if you're milling 4 or 5 at a time, you can very quickly just win a game through mill, which before was pretty difficult. Another advantage of this card is an artifact. Blue is not bad at drawing artifacts. In Standard Brawl, there is a tutor for artifacts, and it's legal. Let's remove 2. And it is Transit Mage. So when this creature enters, you may search your library for an artifact card with value 4 or 5. Reveal it and put it into your hand. So it is possible to search for this artifact, even if it's a one-off. And if you combine to a commander that's in Simic, now you can search for creatures, and you can go into a setup where, in the early game, you search for this creature, you play it, and then you set up your mill pieces, and then once you play the water crystal, you're milling them for a third or half their deck quite quickly. The limitation: this is quite slow for 4 mana, and I would recommend maybe mill decks to run splash other colors so that they're able to find the water crystal faster, and 2, be able to protect their board, because you're giving your opponent quite a bit of time. But this allows you to have an alternate win con and discount those blue spells. So you're 1 mana less required to play. Your time warps, your cyclonic rifts, your rebukes. It's quite useful, this card. Alright, those are the most important cards for blue. Let's move to the next color. Now continuing with black, the first card is Dark Confidence. 2 mana, 2/1, human wizard with, at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put the card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. This is a reprint of Dark Confidant, and the assessing the value of this card is different from 60 mana formats when going into Brawl. The advantage of Brawl is you have more life, and that's a very important deal to consider, because you're a lot more flexible in giving up life for resources, making Dark Confidant quite useful in many mono black decks. The question is whether this card will be a staple or will just be a one-off in in the 99 of many black decks. I would still say this is a pretty useful card. One of the advantages is it's cheap, and two, it's easy to remove. That can be bad for if your opponent instantly removes it. But on the other hand, black runs quite a few cheap removal spells. So in slow matchups where you're suddenly now at low life and don't want to lose life anymore, you have an entire toolbox of spells to sacrifice the Dark Confidant, remove it, or just block against an opponent. There's already a card that does a similar effect. That's the Bat in 3 from Bloomburrow that has this effect. So let's go for, I believe we search Bat, we find it. It's a 3 mana one. Okay, it's Darkstar Augur that has this exact effect with Offspring 1. So there's already a card that exists in Bloomburrow. The advantage here is it costs 1 less. And that matters quite a bit because that means in your first turns, you can play the Confidant, lose a couple life, and if the opponent plays anything aggressive, you can sacrifice the Confidant or use it as a blocker. And it's just quite flexible. And the difference between 2 to 3 may not seem much, but it is a big deal. You're getting into turns where you can play a Mana Rock and the Confidant in a single turn, or you can play a removal spell and play this creature for value. So I do believe Dark Confidant will see play in mono black. Next is All Behead Salvagers. It's a 3 mana 2/3 creature, human, artificer, warrior, and when this creature or another creature or artifact you control die, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. There's already quite a few cards with these effects in Brawl, but Standard Brawl doesn't have that luxury. So having access to this card in Standard Brawl, and even in Brawl may even play this card, gives you a lot more redundancy to play these type of effects for any sacrifice deck. And this plays with Sephiroth, Fabled Soldiers, a 3 mana 3/3 legendary creature, human avatar soldier, and when Sephiroth enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you draw a card, and whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If this is the 4th time this ability has resolved, you transform him. So for the transformation, say we find them. So for the transformed effect, it is this creature transforms into Sephiroth, one-winged angel, so it's a 5/5, and has an emblem. And whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And when it attacks, you may sacrifice any number of other creatures. If you do, draw that many cards. That's the value of Sephiroth. Now going for in Arena, the synergies with this type of commander, they're plenty, especially in Brawl. You have access to a couple other creatures with Blood Artist effects. They are creatures, and there's also Xander's Lounge for payoffs and to get another Blood Artist effects. So you can stack these effects, especially with the emblem. I would say that the 2 most difficult things to do with this deck is 1 is making enough tokens to make 4. You can just run cheap creatures, but there's not that many token makers that are likely to stay in the field, so I would be that's one of the disadvantages. You have to sacrifice 4 in a single turn. But they're very good payoffs. Grave Pact is just one of the best ones. Pretty much when you do your Sephiroth combo, you're wiping the board with Grave Pact. You also have Pitless Plunder for some OTK scenarios as you're going to get multiple treasures. Bastion of the Remembrance is pretty much almost like a pseudo emblem, whereas it's an enchantment. It's a lot more difficult to deal with. But it's a one-off, and in Brawl, it's very slow because you have to tutor for this card and then play this card, and you only get a 1/1 when you do. So just like playing your commander, you save yourself practically 3 mana, and the entire tempo lost you'd get for playing a tutor. So we're able to tutor for other effects because even those type of decks, you have to search for the Bastion, play the Bastion, and then play their other cards. Now instead you can run for your sacrifice outlets. There's quite a few. There's some where you have to pay life, but it counters with the Blood Artist effects because you gain the life back. And the important thing is to have ways to cast it for free. And as that is quite useful because you need to sacrifice 4. So that's quite considerable. And for sack outlets, there's also Altar of Dementia, there's the Ashnod's Altar, or you can play in creature form with Galaternal Bontu or Torgar Famine Incarnate by making them just sacrificing 3 to 6. You not only they'll lose their life, but now they're running down their life total down. This is that could be quite viable. I'll say the big disadvantage of Sephiroth is he's susceptible to interaction, so you need pretty much to set up all your pieces before you play your commander. And at least 4 more creatures you want to sacrifice to, and your sacrifice outlet. That's the big 2-card combo. And then once that's set up, you can just go crazy, draw as many cards as you need to with his effect when he attacks, and just make several creatures. And you want creatures that when they die, they make multiple bodies because now they count as 2. It's a very useful, and I would consider it's a commander that we'll see play. Next card is Adrian the Usurper. It's an 8 mana 4/4 legendary creature, Elder Human Noble. With demons you control have menace, lifelink, and haste. And at the beginning of combat, on your turn, exile up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard. And if exile a card this way, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 5-mana 5/5 black demon. The value of Adrian, I don't think he's that great as a commander, but in the 99 for a reanimator deck, it's almost you pretty much get a 2-for-1 because you don't need to attack. So, for example, you're a deck that mills quite a few creatures. You mill Adrian, you reanimate him, you go into combat, and you make another 5/5. One of the limitations for reanimator decks is you only get 1 creature back, so that creature has to have multiple effects to be worthwhile. Because if your opponent just destroys it, well, you just lost your big creature. Adrian lets you get 2 bodies for the price of 1, and they keep the effects. So the other card example is an Atrax or another tutor card. You're getting multiple cards for the price of 1. This is an important and useful card if for those type of reanimation decks. Next, we got Cecil Dark Knight. So 1 mana, 2/3 human knight with death touch, and whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. And then if the life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, untap Cecil and transform it. His transformed version is Cecil Redeemed Paladin. It's a human knight with lifelink with 4/4, and when our Cecil attacks, other attack creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So the advantage of Cecil, I would say it's even for Brawl, Standard Brawl, this is just a solid commander. You have a higher life total than in 60 card formats. And 2, even its transform effect gives your creature indestructible when you attack, which is quite powerful, especially for an aggressive deck. So it could be a mono black aggressive deck, where instantly having a 2/3 on turn 1 is a big deal, even in Standard Brawl. Decks now have to consider running just removal immediately to mulligan. They'll probably keep worse hands. And if you have a duress effect, what you can do is turn 1 you duress them, and now they're, especially if they kept a 5-card hand, now they go down to 4, and you may just win on the spot with that type of effect. So Cecil is a commander, should not be underestimated, and just looks just solid on his own and quite nice for a mono black aggressive deck in either format. So these are the important cards in black. Let's move to the next color. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe and comment below which cards do you enjoy from the new set or you're most hopeful about. Thanks for watching.